All right, it's kind of time to get started, so let's do that. We may have some late folks come in. Please feel free to sit wherever you like. I know some speakers who would just absolutely get strung out about this weird room shape. I feel very blessed that I'm not one of them. That said, please don't feel ignored if you're over here and I don't look over your way very often. I mean, now, unless it's Alex. If it's Alex, I'm ignoring you. You know, it's fine. All right. Most of us here in the room, and hopefully a fair number of folks who watch this on YouTube later, will have seen Sawyer's talk last year at this conference in Toronto. I do not exaggerate when I say how heartbroken I was to see him give that talk and enumerate for us the kinds of bullying and harassment and abuse that he took at the hands of a small number of members of this community. It absolutely broke me to see that. And I don't think I was alone. In talking to other people, in seeing the looks on other people's faces, it was rough. It was rough. And it was a few months later that I accepted the idea of running for the board of the Perl Foundation, Perl and Raku Foundation, with that in my head as something we needed to, as a board, put our foot down and say, we need that to stop, and we need that to stop now, and we need to give ourselves the tools to handle that kind of stuff, to prevent that kind of harm and injury done to one of our own from happening to anybody else. And I regret that it took seeing people getting hurt, people I care about, more than one, not just Sawyer, but others as well. People whose well-being I care about, getting hurt in order to get me off the dime, to do something about it. And to anyone who has ever been harmed by a fellow community member in that way, through bullying, harassment, and abuse, I'm sorry it took us so long to get here. Please accept that. I am sorry. All right? But here we are. The board has passed a new standard of conduct. It is much more extensive than the one that was signed for this conference. The one you signed on Eventbrite is the older version, which was targeted primarily at things that might happen at a professional conference, an in-person event. And it's a fine standard for that. Good enough for the most part. It gives conference organizers mechanisms for dealing with some of the problems that have come up. And that's good. But we need a bigger problem solver in our community because we have bigger problems that land elsewhere. You know, things that happen on Slack, things that happen in email lists, things that happen, private emails that are sent to people who are doing the work of the foundation. And so that's why we have addressed this matter. The new standards of conduct will take effect on the 1st of August. After the end of this conference, probably this weekend sometime when I recover from the jet lag, I'm going to be working to get that out there in a public repo, make a post on news.pearlfoundation.org, and we will be welcoming public comment where the public comment is designed to make the document better. So if you have a comment that is a pull request that blanks the document, count on that pull request not being merged. It'll just go away. But if you have a fine-tuning of wording or something that will help with legal issues, it was raised to me this morning that European data protection regulations may require that we have some notes in there about that and information that the community retains for a time. And those are absolutely welcome. Before I really get underway here, I want to thank a few people. For the 99+% of you who have never bullied, harassed, or abused another member of the Perl or Raku communities, the word is thank you. Thank you for not doing that, which sounds absurd, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I knew I'd get that from you. Thank you. But thank you also for your contributions to this community. It does take all of us to make a great community. And whether your contribution is that you wrote some magic module that everybody uses, or you're on a team that maintains such a module, like Dancer 2, like Jason Crome and I are, or if you just show up and sit in and join us and participate and be friendly and collaborative and nice to each other, thank you for doing that. Okay? So we'll start with that. So what are we really all about here? There's a couple of things. Do we really need a new one? We already have one. As I said a moment ago, the current one largely is focused on in-person events. But there's an awful lot of bullying, harassment, and abuse that happens outside of in-person events in our community. It has become legendary, almost, outside the community. People know about that. And that's a problem that we, as a board, want to do something about. Do we really need one? Do I really need to okay, I'll say it. Yes. Are we doing this to protect the snowflakes? The first time I talked about empathy in software communities was in Amsterdam at the Perl conference in Europe. Before I was even done talking, there were comments on Twitter, the snowflakes have invaded Perl. People talk about wokeness like it's a bad thing. Kinfolk, woke means caring about the people around you. I'm proud to be woke. Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Absolutely. I care that the people around me are able to do their work in Perl, whatever it is, and do that safely and happily and enjoy what they're doing and love this language as much as I do. All right? So you might have figured out what's the whole document really about. It is about bullying, harassment, and abuse. That's all. There ain't nothing in there about snowflakes or wokes or sleeps or whatever. It's about bullying, harassment, and abuse and preventing them from happening. Why are we doing this? There's a couple of things. The first thing that is so obvious I didn't even put it on my slide, because it's the right thing to do. Protecting our peers from bad actors is the right thing to do. I didn't even think of that until after the slide. It's so obvious. After I'd already produced this slide, I'm like, oh, well, gosh, I guess I ought to say that. Here's the longer explanation. We as a board care enough about the people who are doing the bidding of the board, whether that is paid or not, that they should be able to do that safely. What do we mean by doing the work of the board? Okay, the board's mission is the advancement and promotion of the Perl and Raku programming languages. Conference organizers are doing the bidding of the board. Grant recipients are doing the bidding of the board. The board members are doing the bidding of the board. And if you bully, harass, or abuse those individuals, the new standard of conduct has possible repercussions for you. We're increasing the scope a bit. It's not just in person anymore. Stuff you do when you're hiding behind a keyboard counts now. The bigger why. Okay, most of us here in the room, with a few exceptions, are middle-aged or older. We'll say that way. Many of us have children, some of us grandkids. Certainly almost all of us have some youth in our life, a niece, a nephew, that kid down the block that you know that thinks you're kind of cool because you're a nerd who programs computers and does cool stuff. Most everybody has a youth in their life somewhere, right? That if they became a developer, would you like for that youth to have access to the great things that have happened to you in this community? I would. My kids are on either side of 30. My grandkid is 8. And I would love if any of them got into development to have access to the friendship and the loyalty and the good relationships and the collaboration of people like the ones sitting in this room. Right? I want that. I want that for kids 40 years from now that I don't even know yet, that haven't even been born yet. And to do that, we as a board have to make that happen now. And safety is a big old honking chunk of that. Without safety, that longevity dries up. Without safety, the people who maintain Perl stop doing it. And eventually the release cycle isn't every year, 1 year, but it's every 2 years, then every 5 years, then every 10 years, and then it stops. And Perl is a dead language. It's not right now, neither is Raku. All the evidence you need is look at the release schedule. It's not dead, full stop. But it could be, and safety is a big part of that. We want that big safety to exist so that this community, in some form, we know it's going to change because technology changes and people change and society changes. But we want this community and the good benefits that it presents to be present for those people moving forward. This is my dog, Henry. This is why I say on my bio, I'm the mommy of the cutest dog you will ever meet. He is. Fight me on that if you want. A couple of weeks ago, he got sick. Pancreatitis. Started throwing up, wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink. Anything he drank, he'd throw it back up again. I don't even want to talk about the other end. It was, bad. So we took him to the vet. Where we live in Northeast Georgia, there's a veterinary hospital, and it's a full-service vet hospital. They do grooming. They take care of horses and cows and exotic pets like snakes and birds and lizards and stuff, as well as dogs and cats. And they had this sign on the wall. Now, for those of you that the text is a little small, I've blown up the big part here. They say, verbal or physical abuse of our personnel is disruptive to the care of our patients and will not be tolerated. Thank you for supporting a safe and positive environment for our patients, their families, and our team members. Now, I asked one of the staff, I said, you're talking about verbal or physical abuse of the personnel on the sign. Would you include in that, if somebody came in and was being ugly to somebody else sitting in the waiting room, another customer, and they said, oh, yeah, we wouldn't put up with that. And I said, well, if somebody brought their dog in and while they were waiting, they started beating their dog, you wouldn't sit for that, would you? And they're like, oh, no. We just didn't have room on the sign for all that. Standards of conduct are everywhere. It's not just written ones like this. If you go into a place of worship, church, temple, synagogue, mosque, whatever it is, there is a standard of conduct that is expected of you. All right? And for your own faith, if you have one, you kind of know what that is, probably, pretty well. Okay, if you go into a mosque or a Sikh temple, the first thing you're going to do is take shoes off. Right? If you go into a Hare Krishna temple, you take shoes off. You keep your voice down until it's time to chant. If you go into a cathedral, a different code of conduct is in place. Right? We're all used to this. We know this. Hey, there was a sign on the door outside the hotel. Firearms are not permitted in this facility. That's a code of conduct. Don't bring your gun in here, all right? Put redneck ways, the way that they say it down where I live. Don't bring your gun, all right? All right? Now, if you go to a bar, which admittedly for Pearl people is slightly more likely than church on any given day, you have a code of conduct there. It's a different one than the one in your place of worship, right? I mean, you're certainly allowed to keep your shoes on. In fact, you're probably encouraged to by saying no shoes, no service, right? But if you get in a fight and start a fight with somebody, there's somebody there who is going to remind you of the standards of conduct as forcefully as necessary, perhaps ejecting you from the building, right? Does anybody have a problem with those standards of conduct? And why would anybody have problems with the standard of conduct in our technical community that is there to prevent bullying, harassment, and abuse? But some people do. Okay. Well, we're talking about scope. Las Vegas is locally scoped. That was brilliant. That was the best line out of that whole talk yesterday, was it not? The scope of the new standards of conduct are that, okay, there's this long bit of wording here, which you can read on the slides. You can also read it in the document, but I'll say it in 3 words. Follow the money. If it involves the money of the foundation in any way, this code of conduct applies. There it is. So if it's something we pay for, something we support if we don't pay for it in full, or something happening on behalf of something we pay for, like volunteers at a conference. We're paying for the conference, we're not paying the volunteer. But if you bully Sarah, gosh, the standards of conduct will never get a chance to deal with you because everybody else will have dealt with you. So what do we mean when we talk about bullying, harassment, and abuse? I think some definitions are important. Bullying is one of many forms of harassment. And it is characterized by happening over and over again. That's a common characteristic of bullying. It doesn't have to be one person. It could be a group of people, and in internet parlance, we call that mobbing. That's when I tell everybody on this side of the room, hey, we don't like Mike Weisenborn over there. Send him a nasty email. Oh, do you have any virus code on your laptop that's in a jail? Send it to him in an email. And they all do it. That's mobbing, which is also bullying. It's just bullying at scale. Okay? It's not okay. This is a definition. It comes off of Wikipedia, but it's also very similar to what's in most dictionaries. Force, coercion, hateful teasing or threat to abuse, aggressively dominate, or intimidate. Okay, clear on that one? Good enough? Let's go on. Harassment, which is one of many forms of abuse. All of these cook down to abuse. Oh, wow. Which demeans, debases, humiliates, or intimidates. If what you say is deliberate and it demeans, debases, humiliates, or intimidates a person or a group of people, then it is harassment. It might not be directed at anybody specific. Might be at a group. Or it might be directed at somebody specific, but this person over here gets upset about it. Because if they'll do that to that person, they'll do it to me. I see them harassing this person, and now I am afraid that they will harass me because I have something in common with that person that they are harassing. Doesn't have to be direct. Unintentional harassment can happen. Sawyer gave the example last year. That code is stupid. You can't unstupid code. You can't unstupid a photograph, right? That's kind of unintentional. And he actually gave us a case where he went and talked to the person. What are you trying to say here? Could you say that better? Well, the code doesn't do what they think it's going to do. And I just didn't have time to say that because I was fixing to leave. And okay, that's kind of an unintentional harass there. Can that be fixed? Probably. Maybe. if the person is willing to. So think about context and history and intention in these kinds of cases. When that's just kind of this vague sort of indirect, I'm not harassing you, I'm giving you a direct answer to your code, it's stupid. No, that's not a direct answer to my code, because code can't be unstupided. Abuse. I don't think I really need to give you a whole lot on this one. It's the improper usage or treatment of a person or a thing. Does anybody not know what abuse is? I mean, we could get into all kinds of weird cases and stuff, but it can take a lot of forms. Physical or verbal maltreatment, injury, assault, rape, unjust practices, employee abuse is a thing. Personal or property crimes. All sorts of aggressions here under abuse. Simple discourtesy is not abuse. It is discourtesy. Repeated aggressive discourtesy may rise to the level of harassment or abuse. Again, you deal a little bit with intention there. You have to kind of think about, what are they trying to do with this repeated discourtesy? So think about that. Okay, we talked about the sign on the door. And the sign on the door is great about firearms. It's pretty clear. You can't bring a firearm. So I would suggest that, a long rifle, a pistol, one of those little snub-nosed guns, one of those 3D printed things, those are all covered by that, right? I think, yeah, we can agree with that. But there's an awful lot of dangerous weapons out there that aren't firearms. And we as a community believe, as a board especially, that dangerous weapons have no place at any in-person event that we sponsor. So we swiped this from Title 18 of the U.S. Code, which defines, this is for Title 18 930 applies to your entrance into certain federal government buildings, including court buildings and certain office buildings that are operated by the federal government. All right, and it defines a dangerous weapon as a weapon, device, instrument, material, or substance, animate or inanimate, that is used for or readily capable of causing death or serious bodily injury. Now we're talking. That envelope full of anthrax spores, dangerous weapon. That spear that you have, okay, nerds, come on, some of us are Sharps fans, I get it. You got that spear at home, don't bring it. No, that counts. That big old long knife, my father's K-bar from World War II. No, not even as a prop. Don't. Bob.
What about a multi-tool, a Leatherman?
Thank you. You set me right up. But let me give you a quick list of other things that probably shouldn't be brought before I do that. But you're next. I got you. Slingshots, pellet guns, paintball rifles. They're not firearms. They're dangerous weapons. You can put someone's eye out with that thing in a heartbeat, right? Spears, I mentioned a moment ago, but let's get serious. Halberds, polearms of any sort. Swords. Long knives. Hatchets, axes, great axes. Any of these. Not even as a prop, speakers. No. Specifically accepted in Title 18 of the U.S. Code is pocket knives and multi-tools with sharp blades under 2 1/2 inches. There you go. See? Okay, a pocket knife is not a dangerous weapon. Yes, you can misuse it, but there's already something in the code about that, right? If you misuse your pocket knife in a way that then causes someone a lot of harm, expect that you're not going to get off the hook on this. You're on the hook plenty of other ways. Multi-tools, Leatherman and the like. Look at your longest blade, 2 1/2 inches. Most Leatherman, except for the really peculiar ones, most Swiss Army knives, it's about 2 1/4. You're fine. We're not going to gig somebody for a Leatherman. I know as well as you do, those are awful handy to have. I have one in my backpack, because they're super handy. I all capped this, and I'm going to say it nice and loud. I'm going to read from my slide here. Do not bring them to in-person events, period. Anyone need clarification? No? Cool. Let's move on. How are we going to implement this? Well, you can talk about a cat or a funky... I wanted to avoid backronyms. If you backronym this, you get the name of a product that's in the Perl space that our friend Jason Crome supports for a living. Don't backronym it, because it's not that. The response team is charged with the implementation and enforcement of the new standards of conduct. They are appointed by the board, and it's always 3 people or more. And they're always available to you. Email, write this down, soc@pearlfoundation.org. More on that in a moment, but they're always available to you 24/7. There's always at least 1 board member on it. At present, that team is 4 individuals, 2 of whom are board members. We're about to add a 5th one, I think. Pretty sure we're going to get a 5th one. You may volunteer. If it moves you to be part of this, after you read the document, get in touch. The board makes that appointment. It's a 1-year term that is renewable every year if you choose and if the board accepts. Do a good job, you'll probably get accepted. Okay, let's talk about the team a little bit. Strong recusal rules. This was a past failure. This was something that blew up in the past. Here's the recusal rules. If I, as a board member and as a member of the response team, am the offender, the target, or the reporter, I must recuse myself. If I have ever been in an intimate relationship with the offender, the target, or the reporter, I must recuse myself. If I have worked with any of those people in the last 12 months, I have to recuse myself. Co-workers, I can't get on them. And here's the one that it took me a while to work this out. If I'm co-mate with somebody else on a module that's released on CPAN or any similar sort of repository, or have been in the last 12 months with the offender, the target, or the reporter, I must recuse myself. Jason, one last time. Jason Crome and I are on the Dancer Corps team. Proud to do that. Happy to do that. Love working with this guy. But if he blew it and got reported for the standard of conduct, because we are co-mates, I have to step back. I cannot participate in that response. To avoid the appearance of any kind of bias or impropriety, it has to be the rest of the team doing that. Furthermore, the recusal can reduce the size of the team. If it reduces the size of the team to 1, the team may not act. They have to go to the board and get help. It's never going to be one person calling the shot. Okay? Make sense? Were you with me so far? Good, you're with me. I like it. Something's going weird here. It works via consensus and vote. We're going to talk about it, see what the consensus is, see if we all agree. And in some cases, that has to be full consensus, where everyone must affirmatively say yes. Other cases, it can be less than full consent, which is some saying, the majority saying yes, and the others not saying no. But anytime anybody says no, it may go to a vote. That's fine. It gives us a couple of ways to make decisions. It lets us be a self-organizing team to work around that. Membership on the team will probably be publicly known. I have no qualms whatsoever about telling you I'm on that. I am the board representative to that team. The other team members, I think, won't have a problem with that either, I hope. The team will recommend sanctions to the board. The team does not apply sanctions. The team doesn't have that power. They have the power to recommend it to the board, who must vote to endorse them or reject them or amend them. So it's on the team to investigate, to be the investigative arm, if you will, and the team and the board to decide what happens. Quick response teams. Conference events, these things need responses fast, especially if you've got something really egregious happening in person. You need a response team that's on the ground and can do things. Quick response teams are also appointed by the board for these in-person events. Their mandate begins when the event begins. Their mandate ends when it is over. That team ceases to exist. All present response team members are automatically on it unless they recuse themselves for whatever reason. They may recuse themselves for anything their conscience requires. And some additional members, probably including one or more conference organizers. In the case of a large conference like this, a large event, we like to encourage that. They can only enforce sanctions that happen during the event. I can throw you out of the event on a QRT, but I can't do anything about future events. Instead, I would need to, after the consensus and vote, report the action and recommend further sanction. Say, this guy has done this thing too many times. We've thrown him out 2 years in a row. We've had to eject him early. We've had to tell him don't come to the outside event on Wednesday night. Whatever. Y'all need to do more. Here's our recommendation. The response team and the board can then decide that. Longer term issue. How do you contact the teams? This is the way. If it's not at an in-person event, this is the only way. Do I need to say that again? Let me check. Anybody not catch that?
Are there any other ways to contact the teams?
Outside of in-person events, David, this is the only way. Nothing else works. Thank you. I knew you'd come to bat for me. At an in-person event, you can reach out to any response team or QRT member or any board member who is present. And it'll get handed to them properly. If it's about something that happened outside the conference, it's going to result in an email to SOC. Just do that. It's fine. just send that, But if it's something at the conference that needs a response right away, find any QRT or response team member or any board member to report. Nothing else works. Calling out on an email list and saying, I am calling for a response from the Standards of Conduct response team, does not work. And may be constituting harassment because you are threatening that person. Don't do it. Yelling out on Slack, I'm calling for the Standards of Conduct response team to investigate what I have just seen. It doesn't work, and it may constitute harassment. Say it with me. Nothing else works. So, how do you report something that happened not at an in-person event? Bob, can I call you out on that one? How do you report something that happened not at an in-person event that is in violation of the Standards of Conduct? Email. Mike, where should that email go?
SOC at Perl Foundation.
Thank you. The process, the investigative process that we'll go through has some principles driving it. Reporting is private and confidential. We're not going to publish that email you send. Ever. Ever. It's not going to happen. Investigation is mandatory. We will look at it. We will find out what happened. Some of us may have been there if it's an in-person thing, or may have seen it if it was on an email list, for instance. We'll keep it as confidential as we can. Realize we're going to need to talk to who done it and who they done it to, perhaps, and maybe some other people. In an in-person thing, there might be other witnesses. But we're going to kind of keep it as quiet as we can. The details of the investigation and alleged violation are need to know only. Until the team has figured out what's happened, we ain't even telling the board. We'll tell them we're on something. We got a problem we're chasing, and it's so-and-so, but that's all you get to know just now. We'll let you know. We're on it. Decisions are held back. Several places in the process, we don't make a decision. We want folks to come in without preconceived notions. And we want the team to think about the larger context where appropriate. Like, this person, they went to the beer party last night and they had a little too much, and then they got salty with somebody. And gosh, I wonder, do they even remember that? And if they do, are they upset at what they did? They might be. That could change the response. Rather than, you're gone, sucker, see you, bye-bye. We're not going to do that. We're going to hold back that response long enough to get the facts. But we're going to move as fast as we can, especially at in-person events. And we're going to ignore as much he said, she said, they said as we can. Some of it of necessity we're going to have to deal with. But especially, you got sent a nastygram, Bob. Include me a copy, please. I'd love to see it. Just you said I got a nasty email. Okay, can I see it, please? Let's bring the receipts. And we give the alleged offender every possible opportunity, sometimes there's not any, to make things right. Maybe I was drunk and I was pissed off about something that my wife said, and I've got this hot temper and yada, 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 and I shot my mouth off, and it didn't really even have anything to do with Bob, but I just tore his head right off and stuffed it down his throat. And I'm really sorry and I feel bad about it. Okay. You want me to go with you to talk to Bob about it? Happy to. Would something like that work for you, Bob? It might. Okay. We're going to create that kind of atmosphere where it's okay to admit that you screwed up. And it's okay to screw up a little. Because we all do that. We're all human here, last I checked. How many public call-outs? 0. And somebody else doing public call-outs and wanting a public trial? No. That may itself constitute harassment. We have a right to know. No, you don't. If you're not the offender, the victim, the reporter, a team member, or a board member, your rights are exactly 0. You have none.
Let's assume that something happens, it goes to you, and it gets some action is taken. Is the offender allowed later on to talk? Is the offender allowed to blog post about it?
Depending. Now, yeah, I got thrown out of the Perl conference.
I said offender.
Okay.
Repeat the question.
Okay. The question was, if the offender gets a sanction, for instance, for some action they did, are they allowed to blog about it and talk about it?
I'm sorry. I actually meant to say the victim. Okay.
The victim?
The victim talk about it.
We'd like them not to spend too much territory there because it just invites lots of other action. Obviously, we can't control that, but we don't really want them to spend a lot of time carrying on about that until at the end when we say, some things happened that were in violation of our standards of conduct. We're not going to tell you what they are. Now, if that person does, it's kind of on them at that point. And this person received sanction of this. Now, if the reporter or if the offender then blogs about it and says, yep, they threw me out of the Perl conference. Well, won't be back. I guess I'm gone forever. The board absolutely, or the response team, can respond and say, no, you were rejected for a violation of the standards of conduct. You received a 2-year sanction. This is what happened. This is what we gave you. Don't spew. Because some of that could be itself constituting harassment. Go ahead.
So what about, you mentioned Slack earlier, so IRC Slack chats. What about if people, if arguments ensue, does this cover moderating these arguments as well? And
Yes.
do you have a plan to stop that from escalating?
We want to help encourage the community doing that, both by doing it ourselves. Oh, okay. Thank you. Is there a plan for helping to moderate, such as Slack audio and Zoom calls and the like? Chats as well. Yes, there is. And we feel like as a group, the response team and the board members should absolutely be empowered to step in and say, you're skating on the edge of thin ice. You probably ought to back off a little bit. And that's kind of a given for us, is that we're all going to start doing that kind of thing. We got to move along. What about the time when, hey, how many of us know about past hurts? Somebody in the community that we know, that we care about, has been hurt in the past. We know about it. Hey, you sat in Sawyer's talk last year, so your excuse is over. You do know. What about those? We acknowledge that this community has 35 years worth of hurts saved up that haven't been resolved in many cases. We've had some people who have been problem children. We get it, but we cannot, in any good fairness, enforce this set of rules on the past. We're sorry. However, we're pretty sure that the people who tend to be problem children will quickly run afoul of the new set and be dealt with accordingly. So this gives us a plan moving forward, mostly. Some quick examples of sanctionable behavior. Some, but not all of these, are things that have actually happened. Sending abusive or bullying emails to a board member, board employee, contractor, volunteer, or grant recipient. Grant recipients. Wow, I got asked 3 or 4 times, you sure you mean that? Yes. They shouldn't have to cry over their work either. Harassment, bullying, mobbing, aggressive or abusive behavior during a meeting or a conference, online or in person, doesn't matter. Sustained or repeated disruptions of a real-time meeting of any sort. Bringing a dangerous weapon of any type to an in-person event at any time. That's one of those egregious things. You're probably going to get tossed from the event right then. You probably won't get to come back that year. Might be next year, don't know. Depends on what you bring. Probably. And if you do it more than once, count on more response. In an email or other electronic form or list, wishing harm on somebody else. Mobbing, we talked about that earlier. Not okay. Don't do that. Unwelcome sexual advances or physical contact with other person or their possessions. If you swipe my backpack and run out the back door, we're going to have words. Doesn't matter what's in it. I'm not talking about getting bumped on the escalator. It happens. And we're pretty sure some of those are going to get reported from time to time, and we're just going to have to help calm them down. Accidents and things like that do happen. It's okay. You're not going to get thrown out of the community for that. Using slides, what on up with my animations? Slides with sexual imagery in a presentation. Just don't do it. My console is gone too. Abusing, wait, that's the same slide. Come on. There we go. Deliberate misgendering or use of dead, rejected, or known obsolete names. Okay, it's not just trans people, folks. We have a member of this community who doesn't go by the name they were born with. We have more than one of those. We have several. Deliberately using those, I get it, accidents happen, especially if you've known them forever and ever and ever and you know their old name. You might mind to use it accidentally. That's okay. We're talking about deliberate. known obsolete names. Women get married, and in some cultures, they change their name. I get it. You might call someone by their maiden name if you knew them by that before. If you didn't know them by that before, your excuse is invalid. Harassment of a conference organizer in the course of their work for the conference, before, during, or after. Don't do it. Now, this is one of the egregious ones. This is going to get the throttles all the way to the wall from the get-go. Threatening physical violence or expressing the desire for physical violence against any person at any time, in any place. Full stop. Don't do it. If you're one of those people that talks on Facebook about being all for, killing babies or something, count on the fact that you're not going to be, if going out on the roadside with your firearm and shooting at people driving by is your idea of a fun sport, count on the board, if they ever notice that, being a little cross about that. You have a bad choice of sports. Positive behaviors, things we'd like for you to see. Demonstrate empathy and kindness. We all know how to do that. Being collaborative. Hey, if you're co-mating with anybody on anything, you know how to do this, so do more of it, okay? Being respectful of differing opinions. Yes, there is more than one way to do it. Thank you, Bob. Practically everything we do, there's more than one way to do it, including writing it in a different language. I solved this problem in Perl. Fine, I solved this problem in Raku. Fine, I solved this problem in COBOL because I'm a crazy one like that. I'm nuts like that. I'm working on a YAML reader in COBOL right now for fun. I have a weird idea of fun, don't I? Giving and gracefully accepting constructive feedback. Accepting responsibility and apologizing to the people you fail. And focusing on what's best, not just for me, not just for the place I work, but for our whole community. What's good for the community? Let's talk about the and you, and then we're going to have a little bit of time for a question or two. In the title, I said the new standards of conduct in you. For most people, for the vast, overwhelming majority of people in this community, you do not need to change your behavior in any way to fit into this standard of conduct. That sounds like an overly broad statement, perhaps. But for the vast majority of us, you're fine. Do as you have been doing. You're fine. We love you. We appreciate you. We're glad you're here. If you are one of those individuals who has made a habit in the past or present of bullying, harassing, or abusing your colleagues in this community, please stop. The board is saying your license to do that has been revoked. You will not do that with impunity any longer. Now, there may be a time or two you get away with, and there may be a time or two where you get your hand slapped because we don't keep history before August 1st. But keep doing it. If you do it often enough or egregiously enough, there will be consequences that may affect your participation in some parts of the Perl and Raku communities over which the board has some financial interest. Okay, we got time for one quick question, or maybe two. We've already had several kind of as we go. Does anybody have any grossly large questions about how this is going to work?
Can I set up while you do that, and then you can take as many as you want?
Okay. I'll show my last slide, and then I will give up the lectern to Ingy here so we can set up. You bet. Appreciate you.
I appreciate you.
Do you want the lavalier that I'm using here, or do you want the other handheld?
I just want to test my screen.
Oh, okay. Does anybody have any large-scale questions? Yeah.
So, a question I've encountered in the past in a different non-tech community is who put you in charge?
The board did.
No, I know.
Wait, well, who put the board in? Well, and that's kind of...
People argue often when you try to introduce something like
Absolutely.
that, and you get like the basic question is who put you in charge?
Right. Well,
Who put the bottom
The people who donate to the 501c3 that we are. We are a nonprofit in the United States under Section 501c3 of the IRS Code. People who donate to that have an interest in how we run that, how we use their money.